I'm Stephen Monteith, and I'm here to rewrite Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. It's weird, but when I started this rewrite feature, it wasn't so much the bad movies I wanted to rewrite, like when I did Overdrawn at the Memory Bank, or even popular ones, like when I did Star Wars. Those were both a big part of it, of course. But I think the real challenge accepted aspect for me was the classic movies that, as a writer, I've always wanted to try my hand at. And Dr. Strangelove is one of them. People always say you shouldn't touch the classics, and there are some that even I don't think should be messed with. But I've said it a few times in the last few years, and I'll say it again now. If there's any point in modern history when Dr. Strangelove could be remade, it's at this point. I'm going to say it right now, up front. This video is going to piss off a certain segment of the US population. And if you're part of that segment, then don't even bother. Yes, this rewrite is going to be substantially more political than my other rewrites, but it's a satire. Any resemblance to actual politicians and or political realities and events is intentional. But if you can't have a sense of humor about it, then you're probably going to hate movies in general. We're not going to discuss real-world politics in the comments section. You can go to an actual news channel's page for that. And I will delete whatever comments I feel go too far in criticizing this video. That being said, let's talk first about Dr. Strangelove itself. I'm about to spoil basically the whole movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, all I can say is it came out more than half a century ago. Go watch it. Alright. Dr. Strangelove is about nuclear war. Not so much nuclear war, really, as the possibility that we could just plain fall into it. Despite all the precautions, all the safeguards in place, and all the countries that have nuclear weapons, all it would really take is one madman with the will to set it off, and just enough breakdown in communications to keep everyone else from stopping it. That's what Dr. Strangelove is about. This movie came out in 1964, and the Cuban Missile Crisis was just a couple of years prior. The Cold War had never been hotter. People were building bomb shelters in their homes. The idea that we could all die in a nuclear holocaust was never more stark in people's minds. So, of course, Stanley Kubrick decided to make a comedy about it. A general named Jack D. Ripper, I kid you not, he goes a little funny in the head, as they say in the movie. He starts believing conspiracy theories about communists and their plans to destroy America in what are frankly ridiculous ways. He becomes so paranoid that he cuts off all communication in or out of his airbase. He tells his bomber planes that Washington has been destroyed and that they need to launch a counter-strike against Russia. He believes that in so doing, once the president realizes American bombers are about to drop nuclear missiles on Russia, that America will have no choice but to launch the rest of their nukes to keep Russia from destroying America in retaliation. But what General Ripper doesn't know is that Russia has a failsafe, a doomsday machine, that will automatically set off enough nuclear weapons to cover the whole world in a radioactive cloud for 100 years. The rest of the movie is spent trying to force General Ripper to recall the planes, trying to contact the bombers, who can only receive a message with a special code prefix that nobody really knows, and trying to get paranoid Americans to work with paranoid Russians in the White House war room to save the world. They fail. And just before the bombs go off, just before the world ends, basically, the last thing we see is that no one has learned anything. Because even as we're all about to die, America and Russia are still trying to one-up each other, still trying to gain some kind of advantage. The clear implication is that even if we start to rebuild after 100 years, we'll meet again, and we'll still be enemies. Funny stuff, right? Despite a disclaimer at the beginning of the movie by the United States Air Force that the events of Dr. Strangelove could never take place, the military did begin addressing potential breakdowns in communication in the wake of the movie's release. Many movies and TV shows since have posited other scenarios for people trying to start nuclear war, including more than one Tom Clancy movie. Even The West Wing, a show where all the government agencies are run by adults, has made the potential for nuclear war the subject of more than one episode. And a report not too long ago claimed that it indeed had been possible for a long time for someone other than the president to launch a nuclear strike against another country. Supposedly, after half a century, we've finally closed all the gaps, and no one besides the president will ever be able to give the order to launch American nukes ever again. So, how would we remake a movie in the modern era about a madman starting a nuclear war? Simple. Make the madman the president. This is the part of the video that's most likely going to anger a lot of people. The part where I show you the real-world figures on whom I have based my movie characters. It's not like Stanley Kubrick didn't base characters in Dr. Strangelove on real-life politicians and officers, by the way. The president in his movie was based on Adlai Stevenson, who in real life never actually became president. General Ripper's paranoia in the movie was fueled by actual conspiracy theories of the time, that some of which still exist today. Kubrick also wasn't afraid to give them ridiculous names, obviously. In addition to Jack D. Ripper, the president's name is Merkin Muffley, and one of his top generals is Buck Turgidson. If you don't know what those names mean, you can look them up on your own. So here's my cast of characters for my dark comedy about the end of the world. First, President Richard Buxton. He's the purported billionaire who charmed a nation into following him literally into hell. We'll get to that part in a bit. He's not particularly suited to policy. In fact, he often lets his advisors in Congress handle legislation while he goes golfing. For the most part, it's not a bad arrangement for the country. At least, not in the movie I'm making. On the other hand, he's an armchair warrior who never fought in a war and gets stars in his eyes every time someone so much as mentions nuclear weapons. He even wanted to use one to blow up a hurricane. A lot of these details about President Buxton come out during the course of the movie through dialogue between other characters who are more than a little alarmed when he starts talking more and more about other countries being threats to America and how we need to take stronger and stronger measures against them. Oh, and he literally takes security briefings while he's getting his orange bronzer applied. His defense secretary, Bull Madison, gets increasingly angry every time President Buxton suggests the use of force, especially in situations that don't call for it. The president's top advisor, Jackson Wrigley, is also his top suck-up, and he pisses off everyone else in the White House because he knows how to control the president through his ego. The press secretary, Ken Falstaff, just makes up things to tell the press, because no one ever talks to him. Literally. He's never seen in the movie talking to anyone when he's not at the press podium. His assistant leaves notes on his desk to let him know that no one has answered his calls. But that's the only evidence we have that he even has an assistant, because the assistant is never seen. And then there's the president's top propagandist, Dr. Gerbil, always seen on the news, especially by the president, who watches the news religiously to hear how he's doing. Dr. Gerbil is a world-class spin doctor, making sure the president gets credit for every good thing that happens and that someone else gets blamed for every bad thing. His greatest achievement will be when he sells at least half the country on the prospect of nuclear war. As I said, it's not unprecedented in fiction to talk about nuclear war, but whereas most movies and TV shows on the subject are dramas or political thrillers, Dr. Strangelove was a comedy, like I said, and so is this movie. President Buxton would be a comedic figure, a clown, a buffoon. He didn't exactly run for office on a platform of nuking the rest of the world, but we see clips of his campaign and we hear pundits talk about it, about how he ran claiming that America lived under a lot of treaties and agreements that were signed years, decades, even centuries ago in some cases, and that times had changed and we needed to sign new deals, and that he was the person to get those deals for us. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Once in office, though, he just started withdrawing America from all the treaties and agreements, one by one, without even setting up meetings to arrange new treaties. Kept claiming that new deals were on the horizon, but that other countries, even our allies, were the ones blocking things. Started painting all our allies as our enemies. He actually withdraws the United States from the UN and from NATO, isolating America more and more, while claiming we need to protect our country from everyone, especially other people who have nuclear weapons. Not just Russia and China and North Korea and Pakistan, but also the UK, France, India, and Israel. Anyone with nukes was a threat to America. His staff and his military commanders are, for the most part, still loyal to him, the ones that stick around. But when they learn that he himself wants to launch nuclear weapons at everyone else who has nuclear weapons, what do? Some try to reason with him. It doesn't work. Some try to undermine him. He brands them traitors and fires them. Some try to raise the alarm, but he declares it to be fake news, until, of course, he's actually ready to order the nuclear strikes. And all along, as the prospect of the president launching nuclear weapons spreads more and more across modern media, more and more people are forced to decide whether or not they would actually stand by President Buxton, as more and more people try to get the country to see reason. The president has his loyalists, just like all dictators in history have had. They're reassuring the country that there's no way the president would ever actually launch the nukes, but that even if he did, he'd be justified in doing so, because our enemies deserve it. They're threats to us, and they're all about to attack us. His political opponents try to say there's no danger of other countries launching nukes at America, and they try to contact the other nuclear powers to get them to declare that they won't launch nukes. Obviously, they have to go behind the president's back to do so, which just gives the president and his allies more room to say that these people aren't trustworthy. And the more and more the president's enemies deny that there's any danger, the more and more the loyalists say it's just proof that something must be done, even though the president would never actually do it. In the end, when the president finally does launch nuclear weapons against basically the rest of the world, under the flimsiest of rationalizations, half the country is firmly on his side. They cheer him as the rockets fly towards the rest of the world. The other half of the country is properly appalled and trying to find places to hide because of reports that other countries have launched their nukes at the U.S. But the president and his supporters don't believe the fake news. In fact, there's a big rally right in front of the White House as a nuclear missile goes off in Lafayette Park, all to the sound of Randy Newman's Political Science. See, Dr. Strangelove has a montage at the end of a bunch of nuclear bombs going off around the world, set to Vera Lynn's We'll Meet Again. And I think I would play Randy Newman's Political Science for you here, but I don't want to get a copyright claim against me. So just listen to it yourself, because I think it would be the perfect song to end this movie with. Now, Dr. Strangelove was based on Peter George's novel Red Alert. I would call this movie Orange Alert, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the President. A movie about how, as long as you believe in the president, he can never do anything wrong. Because in the end, that's what Dr. Strangelove was really about. It was about hubris. It was about overwhelming arrogance and confidence. And it didn't even really matter what your overwhelming confidence was in, really. Everything was futile in the end, because that's the ultimate end for everyone who has blind faith. You can't just have blind faith. You have to be willing to question what's up there even when it's presented by people you trust. You have to be willing to question it. If you're not, then, well, that's just how the apocalypse is going to take you. So that's my rewrite of Dr. Strangelove, reset for a modern era, my reboot. And this would normally be the part of the video where I tell you to go check out my website, but I'm actually in the process of revising my website and my podcast and my ebook distributions. I'm going to get more into that in another video next week. I'm going to set up my I'm going to give a video about my favorite podcasts from this last year, my favorite videos from this last year. I'm going to talk about those a bit, and then I'll tell you what my plans are for my website and so forth in the new year. So be sure to tune in next week to this channel to see all about that. In the meantime, you can watch my other videos here, and like I say, try to be civil in the comments, and remember that this is all satire, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.